Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to share a very personal story about how one small decision completely changed the course of my life. And not in the way I expected. It's about love, compromise, and learning the hard way why some choices are more permanent than we realize. If you've ever felt dismissed or unheard in a relationship, or struggled with standing up for yourself, this one's for you. Make sure you stick around until the end. There's a lesson in here that I think a lot of us need to hear. Let's dive in. You know how people always say tattoos are permanent decisions? Ones you really shouldn't rush into or make lightly. Well, I'm about to tell you exactly why that advice exists. I'm Claire. I'm 29 years old, and for a long time, I honestly thought I was just trying to save my marriage. But as it turns out, some decisions have a way of blowing up your entire life in ways you never could have predicted. My husband, Mark, and I had been together for 5 years altogether, married for 3. We shared a modest city apartment, had our little routines, our Friday night takeout dinners, the kind of quiet stability I thought was the foundation of a good relationship. But there was this one thing that always seemed to come between us. Looking back, maybe I should have paid closer attention to why Mark was so stubbornly against it. It all started shortly after our engagement party. I was still caught up in the whirlwind of wedding planning, buzzing with excitement about making our bond feel even more special. That's when I floated the idea of getting matching tattoos. Nothing flashy or extravagant, just something small, simple, meaningful just for us. Mark's reaction was immediate and cold. Without even looking up from his phone, he said, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. No, let me think about it." No questions about why it mattered to me. Just flat dismissal. I tried to explain it wasn't some wild impulse. Maybe just our initials intertwined or our wedding date in Roman numerals. But he shut me down again with a firm, "I'm not against tattoos. I just don't want one." End of conversation. But for me it wasn't the end. That idea burrowed into my thoughts. I kept imagining how sweet it would be to carry a permanent symbol of our love, something only we shared. So every few months I'd bring it up again, hopeful he might soften or see it through my eyes. Instead, his irritation grew. "We've talked about this, Claire. My answer hasn't changed," he'd say, the way he said my name like I was a child being scolded. What hurt the most wasn't just his refusal, it was the inflexibility. Marriage, I thought, was about compromise, about meeting halfway. Yet Mark seemed incapable of even considering this one small thing that clearly mattered to me. Each time I raised the tattoo idea, he looked like I was asking him to do something impossible, like leap off a cliff. It made me feel like my feelings didn't count, like he was the sole arbiter of what was important in our relationship, and I was just supposed to accept it. And his dismissive attitude stung. "I don't need a tattoo to prove I love you," he said, completely missing the point. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about creating a shared memory, a beautiful expression of our connection. But Mark couldn't see past his own discomfort to understand what I was really asking for. Eventually I stopped bringing it up directly. But the resentment simmered quietly beneath the surface. Here I was, willing to bend on everything, from where we lived to holiday plans with his family. But he couldn't even entertain the idea of one tiny tattoo for me. Then came a transfer at work to a new department. Honestly, I was ready for a change. The new team was more relaxed, more creative. That's where I met Lucas. Lucas was in his early 30s, with an arm covered in tattoos so intricate and artistic, it looked like a living canvas telling the story of his life. At our first team lunch, I asked about his ink, and his face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. He spent 20 minutes describing every piece. The meaning, the symbolism, the story behind the artist he chose. To him, tattoos were an art form, a way to mark important moments, not some reckless rebellion. We started having lunch together regularly. Lucas asked about my day, remembered little details, and when I mentioned Mark's attitude toward tattoos, he just shook his head in sympathy. "Some people just don't get it," he said. "Tattoos aren't about being rebellious. They're about self-expression and marking milestones in your life." For the first time, someone truly understood what I was feeling. I confided in Lucas about my idea for matching tattoos with Mark, and his stubborn refusal. He listened quietly, then said something that hit me like a punch. A real man wouldn't be scared of something so small, especially if it means that much to his wife. The blunt truth in his words made me realize maybe Mark's refusal wasn't just about tattoos. Maybe it was about not caring enough to step outside his comfort zone for me. Lucas started showing me pictures of couple tattoos on his phone. Elegant designs celebrating love and commitment. "Your husband doesn't know what he's missing," he said one afternoon, scrolling through the images. "These couples create something permanent together. Something that says, 'You matter enough for me to change my body for you.'" His words felt like validation for what I'd been feeling for months. While Mark treated the whole thing like a joke, Lucas made me feel heard, understood, valued. He'd listen patiently when I complained about Mark's stubbornness, nodding and saying, "You deserve someone who celebrates your ideas, not tears them down." I found myself looking forward to work lunches just to talk to him. At home, Mark was still the same wall of resistance on the tattoo topic. But Lucas was opening my eyes to what real support felt like. Not long after, Mark started asking questions about my lunches, about why I seemed happier, who I was spending time with. The irony wasn't lost on me. His curiosity was born from suspicion, not care. When I mentioned Lucas by name, Mark's face tightened. "The guy with all the tattoos," he said, like that explained everything. "I bet he's real supportive of your tattoo idea." His sarcasm made my blood boil. Even as I made new friends and felt better about myself, Mark twisted it into something negative. That's when I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I was tired of walking on eggshells around his hang-ups. Tired of having my dreams dismissed and my friendships questioned. Lucas showed me what encouragement looked like, and I wasn't going to let Mark's fear hold me back. One Tuesday evening, after Mark came home complaining about his day without asking about mine, I made a decision. I was done waiting for his permission. "I'm going shopping after work tomorrow," I told him. It wasn't a lie. I was shopping for the perfect tattoo design and the courage to finally get one. The next evening, I met Lucas at a tattoo studio he loved, Iron Canvas. Walking in was like stepping into a different world. Walls covered with artwork, the hum of machines, people getting beautiful designs etched into their skin forever. Lucas introduced me to Rico, a gentle tattoo artist with an amazing portfolio. When I explained I wanted a design symbolizing strength and independence, Rico's eyes lit up. He flipped through a book of Chinese calligraphy and showed me two symbols that perfectly captured the meaning I wanted. Elegant, powerful, exactly what I hoped the tattoo would represent. Then Lucas suggested something unexpected. "Add something personal," he said. "Something to commemorate this moment of growth." Without thinking too hard, I found myself saying, "What about initials? LW." Looking back, I can't fully explain why I said it. Maybe it was gratitude for Lucas's support. Maybe it was spite toward Mark's refusal. Or maybe it was the way Lucas's face softened at the thought of being part of this moment. "Are you sure?" Lucas asked, but his smile told me he hoped I was. Rico added the small letters beneath the Chinese symbols. Suddenly, this tattoo wasn't just about strength and independence. It was about having someone in my life who actually supported those qualities. Lucas held my hand throughout the process, telling jokes, reminding me to breathe through the sting. He kept telling me how proud he was, how beautiful it looked, how this tattoo would change my life. When it was done, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had taken control of her own story. She stopped waiting for someone else's approval and started living for herself. Driving home felt like floating. I carried a secret under my sleeve, proof that I could make decisions for me. When I walked through the door, Mark was on the couch, TV on as usual. "How was shopping?" he asked without looking up. Instead of answering, I rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark stared at the tattoo like it was an alien object. His expression flickered from confusion to recognition, then to something I hadn't seen before, shock. "What the hell is that?" he finally managed. I explained the Chinese symbols, their meaning, how beautiful I thought they were. But his eyes kept darting to the small letters beneath. "What are those initials, Claire?" My heart pounded, but I wasn't apologizing. "They're Lucas's initials," I said, meeting his stare. "He supported me when you refused to." Mark's mouth dropped open. His brain was trying to process that his wife had permanently marked her body with another man's initials. "You tattooed another man's name on your body?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut deeper than a yell. I tried explaining about friendship, support, feeling valued. But Mark just stared like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. Then he said the words that changed everything between us. "That's disrespectful to me. You need to get those removed." Just like that. Not a request, an order. After months of refusing to consider tattoos together, now he wanted to control what I did with my own body. "The hypocrisy is staggering," I shot back. "You told me I could get a tattoo. You just said you wouldn't get one with me." "Well, I found someone who would share that experience," I said firmly. Mark's jaw clenched, but I wasn't done. "You refused to be part of something that mattered to me, so I found someone who wasn't scared of commitment." The words felt good, like I was finally standing up for myself after months of being dismissed. "This isn't about commitment," Mark said, voice rising. "It's about you getting another man's name permanently on your body. How do you not see how messed up that is?" But all I heard was control. Him telling me what I should or shouldn't feel. He'd had his chance and chose rejection. Now he wanted to dictate what happened next. The following days were unbearable. Mark would catch me looking at my tattoo and shake his head. Every conversation circled back to Lucas, the initials, the betrayal. He asked pointed questions about my lunches, about how long I'd planned this behind his back. The paranoia was exhausting. Then he asked the question I dreaded most. "Are you sleeping with him?" The accusation hung heavy, poison in the air. I looked at him, the man who was supposed to trust and support me, reduced everything to jealousy. After all I'd explained about friendship and support, he boiled it down to sex. "At least he's a man," I snapped. The words came out harder than I meant, but I meant them. At least Lucas had the courage to support someone he cared about. At least he wasn't scared of a little ink. At least he made me feel like my dreams mattered. Mark's face turned stone cold. I knew I'd crossed a line. But honestly, I was done tiptoeing around his fragile ego. 2 weeks later, Mark filed for divorce. No drama, no yelling. Just cold, businesslike silence. Lawyers and curt texts dividing our life into pieces. I kept hoping he'd cool down, realize he was throwing away 5 years over a tattoo. But Mark made his choice. And it didn't include me. Divorce proceedings were surreal. Sitting across from each other in mediations felt like splitting office supplies, not breaking a marriage. Mark never looked me in the eye, never acknowledged the history. I was a problem to solve, not the woman he'd vowed to love forever. The day it was finalized, I was alone in my new studio apartment, the only place my single income could afford. Then my phone rang. Mark's name on the screen made my heart leap, hoping maybe he'd changed his mind. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "I finally got a tattoo," he said, no greeting. For a brief moment I felt vindicated. "Really? What did you get?" I asked. "The date of our divorce," he said, voice cold. "To symbolize strength and independence." Silence. Just the sound of my heart breaking again. Before I could respond, he hung up. Sitting there, staring at my tattoo, reality hit like a freight train. He wasn't coming back. No apologies, no regrets, just moving on, mocking everything I thought we shared. 6 months later, through a mutual friend, I learned Mark was seeing someone new. Athletic, outdoorsy, the kind of woman who probably never pressured anyone to get matching tattoos. When I asked for details, my friend looked at me with pity and quickly changed the subject. Meanwhile, Lucas's situation unraveled too. Turns out he'd been married the entire time we'd been talking. His wife discovered our texts, innocent as they were, and made it clear our friendship had to end. She even called my work, warning that any contact would cause trouble. Suddenly, I was alone with my choices. Divorced, living in a cramped studio, marked forever by another man's initials, with no relationship left to show for it. The Chinese symbols, once symbols of strength and independence, became reminders of how badly I misread everything. My family tried to support me, but I saw judgment in their eyes. Mom would sigh when she glanced at my tattoo, like it was evidence of poor decisions. My sister asked if I'd thought about how Mark might feel. Even coworkers treated me differently, like I was a cautionary tale about workplace friendships gone wrong. But the worst was the loneliness. I told myself the tattoo was about independence and self-expression. But alone in that apartment, I realized it was about trying to force someone to love me on my terms. When that failed, I sought validation from someone who wasn't really available to give it. Here's the harsh truth nobody wants to admit. Sometimes you make a choice that feels right in the moment, and it changes your entire life in ways you never imagined. Sometimes standing up for yourself means losing everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes the person you're trying to prove something to isn't even paying attention anymore. I still have the tattoo. The Chinese symbols have faded, but Lucas's initials remain dark. I've thought about covering or removing them, but they're part of my story now. Mark got his fresh start. Lucas went back to his marriage, probably with new boundaries. And me. I got what I said I wanted, strength and independence, just not the way I pictured. People ask if I regret it. The answer is complicated. I regret how it hurt Mark, how it ended us, how it isolated me. But I don't regret finally doing something for myself, even if it was the wrong thing. Sometimes when I get dressed, I catch a glimpse of those initials and remember what it felt like to have someone encourage my dreams instead of crushing them. Then I remember that person was never really mine, and the encouragement came with strings I didn't see until it was too late. Maybe the real lesson isn't about tattoos or marriage or workplace friendships. Maybe it's about the difference between true support and manipulation, between standing up for yourself and burning your life down to prove a point. Maybe strength means accepting your mistakes and living with the consequences. Or maybe sometimes you just have to tattoo another man's initials on your arm to learn that permanent decisions deserve more than temporary feelings. Either way, I'm still here, still learning, still trying to figure out what strength and independence really mean when you're starting over with nothing but a tiny apartment and a story you wish you could rewrite. Thanks so much for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to share, but sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the most about who we are and what we really need. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more real talk about relationships and personal growth. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever made a decision that changed everything? Drop a comment below and let's support each other through these messy, complicated journeys. Remember, strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up and owning your story. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.